Welcome to Moonshot, the show where we explore the biggest ideas in technology and innovation and the people making them happen. I'm Christopher Lawson, and in this episode we're diving deeper into the future of flight with Starburst founder and CEO François Chopard. Now, François is someone who is deeply interested in the future of the aerospace industry, and he has some fascinating insights into how the industry will evolve and compete with other modes of transportation like the much talked about Hyperloop. So join us as we take flight with François Chopard.
Since I was a kid, I was dreaming of flying very fast from one point to another. I was dreaming to, at night, go to the US and come back in the morning just to have more fun, meet more people. And so I've always dreamed of Superman capabilities. So yes, and then I become an engineer. I work for Airbus. I work for the US Air Force as an engineer. And so it has always been a passion. So I'm François Chopard, CEO and founders of Starburst Accelerator, and we basically accelerate aerospace startup from seed to Series A. So we divided into four buckets. Something that is really what we call new space, above 500 kilometers from space. And so it's all about the new type of space stations, what you can manufacture in space. And actually there's a startup that just found out what was interesting to manufacture in space and what could be profitable to manufacture there under the zero G and bring back on Earth. And so as soon as you manufacture a product in space, you need more people, so you need to do more launchers. You need to then bring more food, water, and so you start to do asteroid mindings. You need space communication, and so there's an entire ecosystem that is emerging and that we are looking at very deeply. That's the first part. The second part is more around commercial aviation. We talked about supersonic jets, supersonic aircraft. It's coming back on the market after the Concorde stopped flying about 15 years ago. And so we've seen a couple of startups, actually 4 or 5. NASA is working on that. So it's a very hot topic. A lot of funding are going in that direction, and we really hope to see these planes flying in the next 4 to 5 years. And on the side of these supersonic jets, we see more cleaner aircraft around hybrid propulsion, which means electrical engines. And as soon as you put electrical engine on your aircraft, you can redesign it a bit better, more efficient, and more aerodynamic friendly.
Let's talk a little bit about flying cars, because it is something that you discuss a fair bit in a lot of your talks. You talk about flying cars, and you've published a report on flying cars as well. How far away are we from all owning a car like in the Jetsons, or flying around?
So there's two approaches, and it's going to be a step-by-step one. If you want to a flying car that you're going to have in your garden, being able to take off from everywhere, landing everywhere, and flying autonomously, it's going to take a while. But if you're thinking of a more electric helicopter mixed with an aircraft that is taking off out of helipads that are already existing, can be electric, can be fly by a commercial pilot, and can be shared by a bunch of passengers for going, for example, from one point to the airport. Then you're going to be able to see that very soon and at a very economical price.
In the past couple of years, there's been a lot of excitement around Elon Musk's Hyperloop, which could transport people between cities in just minutes. And François has some fascinating insights around how this technology might impact on the aerospace industry. The Elon Musk approach to transportation, where he said, there's problems with having all of these flying vehicles around, and he believes that the future of transport is underground. But you invest in aerospace, so you obviously see the future being in the air. Can you talk about that sort of difference and where you see that sort of evolving?
Yeah, so the project is pushing are, first of all, very expensive, because when you dig a tunnel, we can talk about it because of our experience between France and UK. It's been very painful, very, very expensive. The company who built it is still not profitable, and even there's a huge traffic. So Yes, for sure it will happen, whether we're going to need to dig or it's going to be tube above the ground. Yes, it would make sense, especially if you can fly at 1,000 kilometers. But that, for me, will mostly replace commercial aviation. From San Francisco to LA, yes, in 10 minutes, makes sense, or 15 minutes. It's not going to be a flying car. It could be a railway, or it could be Hyperloop. Yes, but it's going to replace planes. And that's the case in France. We have a high-speed train, and as soon as there's a high-speed train between Paris and another city, we see that the traffic with aircraft is going down. It's the case with Marseille, Bordeaux. Each time we can reach a city in less than 2 or 3 hours, then you know that the air traffic is going to go down.
Why has there, up until the last, couple of years, why has there not been much development in supersonic flight? Because we had Concorde and then it just sort of seemed to have stopped.
So there's a couple of reasons, and the first one would be that people didn't get why the Concorde stopped and what was wrong with the Concorde. For a lot of people, it was related to cost, but it was related to cost because they didn't sell enough. And so they couldn't upgrade it, they couldn't maintain it. You just have to remember the Concorde was developed on paper and with no electronic on board. So very basic, and so there was a lot of optimization and improvement that could be done. That's the first thing. Second thing, that the big players, Airbus and Boeing, didn't believe in his successor. And they're also very focused on competing against each other, on building new type of aircraft, that there was a direct need and a direct request from the airline. So they were already very busy, and they are still very busy with their supply chain, making sure that they're delivering the thousands of aircraft that they have in their backlog. So the two big players were very busy. And so because of that, because also of the success of a couple of entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, SpaceX, and a couple of more, we just realized that breaking into aerospace or commercial aviation was finally possible. And all these big barriers, again, around regulation, certification, were at the end possible to be achieved. And that's why a couple of years ago we've seen Aerion, I was talking about, supersonic jets. But it was a business jet, and the business jet market is not doing great, so they are still struggling. And boom, combined right technology with the right business model, and they are going great. They raised 33 million, and it's an amazing project.
Which does seem like relatively a small amount, really, right, for a jet that carries passengers.
So yes, and they're going to need to raise much more, but it's the venture capital approach, where you go step by step, you raise for a year, you achieve your objectives and target, which for them is to build a small supersonic jet, demonstrate their abilities to master a couple of technologies, and then if they succeed, and if they can convince more airlines to come on board, then they will raise 100 or 200 million, do more, and then probably raise again 500 million, and then they will be done. They need to also find the right engine manufacturer, because they won't be able to do it themselves. So they need to find a couple of partners, and yes, then they will raise more money.
And we'll be back with more Moonshot in a moment. Now, before the break, we were chatting with François Chopard from Starburst Accelerator, and he's someone who is deeply excited about the possibilities of the wave of investment in aerospace and in supersonic jet startups like Boom Technology. But he's also interested in a bunch of other ideas that are changing the future of flight, like flying cars and jetpacks, and some ideas that sit a little further from Earth. What sort of other companies are you you're quite excited about at the moment that are doing things in aerospace that really fascinate you?
So there's one I was mentioning it very quickly called Made in Space. So they they got known getting contract from NASA about 20 million to build or to put into the International Space Station a 3D printer and send the part through space communication, and then manufacture a couple of small parts into space.
That's one of the huge issues with even all these plans to go to Mars, is that we can't just take everything from Earth, because we're limited in terms of the size of what these spacecrafts will be.
And so now you just need to bring powder into space, and you can just send the drawings through space internet, and then manufacture. For example, what they did, they manufactured tools that they would need to fix some part of the space station, and it worked great. Everybody was happy, very excited. That same startup just discovered a product that would make sense to manufacture in space, and it's a type of fiber optics that when you manufacture it under zero gravity, the properties are so much better than the one on Earth that it's worthwhile making it in space and bringing it back. And I think it's very cool. And as soon as you have a proper space business case, then we're going to see much more things happening into space, much more people. People are predicting that in 5 to 10 years, we're going to have 5,000 people in space, which could be huge, which means hundreds of different space stations. So yeah, I think it's fascinating what's happening right now into the aerospace industry, and what's fascinating me also is that it's all coming from startups.
It must be really exciting for you now that you see all of this happening. You must be much closer to that childhood dream of what you're hoping.
Yes, and I'm also a private pilot, so I love all this stuff. And also we are in a position where we see everything. We have the opportunity to not just look at one startup or work into one startup, but see hundreds of startups. And sometimes, it's like a puzzle. You see one, but you don't really understand if it makes sense. But as soon as you see 10 to 15, all working on complementary technologies or products, then you really see the big picture, especially on flying cars. There's startups working on new type of materials, new type of propulsion technology, new batteries, new sensors for avoidance, a new algorithm with artificial intelligence for these cars to avoid each other, it's like 15 different startups that are necessary to build these flying cars, and all the automated system and mapping that is necessary for making it safe.
And I was reading on your website that average investment is sort of around 5 million euro? Is that correct? Or
so depend on the countries, but we see different seed rounds or Series A rounds. In Europe it's a bit lower than in the US. In the US it's more around 8 million. So we said, in the past NASA was the main player and the main actor. NASA is still, one of the main. They changed their role. They're not in the first seat in a lot of cases, but they're financing all these amazing American startups. And the only sad thing that I have on my own is that most of this stuff is happening in the US. And so I would love to see more stuff in Europe, more stuff in France or in other countries, which mean more financing available.
Is that just a matter of finance, or is it also regulation, and like what needs to happen for that to happen in Europe?
Yeah, it's a lot related to finance. Most of the money is either in the Silicon Valley or is in Washington, D.C. when we talk about aerospace. You see Asia growing fast and putting more money on the table. It's not so much the case in Europe, and that's a bit lacking. We are living in a very exciting time. Whether it's going to be a massive innovation in the next 15 years, a lot of things are going to change in our sky and now the way we travel, basically.
If you've loved this episode of Moonshot, then make sure you share it with all your friends. They can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, or wherever else you get podcasts. Our website is moonshot.audio, where we post transcripts and other details about the show. Our theme music is by Breakmaster Cylinder, and our cover artwork is by the incredibly talented Andrew Millist. Moonshot is a production of Lawson Media and is hosted by me, Christopher Lawson, and also Andrew Moon. That's all we have today. Join us again next time as we power our way into the future.